Hello, everybody, and welcome. I was just telling everybody, kind of the first of its kind when it comes to live free events put on by our Social Rejects Club. Many of you guys have either already taken a Social Rejects class or you're enrolled for the spring. And so that's really exciting. That is my hope, is to keep us connected with events like this, because I've gotten a lot of feedback from people who have been a part of a class that have said, man, I want to stay connected to this group because this helps me stay accountable and continue to make small changes 1 week at a time, like we've talked about, and influence your local communities. Um, another another thing that I just want to make you aware of is that if you're not enrolled in the spring class, it is not too late. It ends tomorrow, the enrollment, and we start next week. And by attending this or watching the replay, you can get 20% off with the code artificial. 20% off with the code artificial. If you're like, I'm on the fence, I'm not sure, but now I want to do it. Tomorrow's the last day. So when it comes to AI and kids, or just AI and adults, one thing that maybe you've noticed is that when you strike up a conversation with someone about artificial intelligence, they will start to tell you about all the ways they're using it. Oh, yeah, I love using it to build my recipe lists. I love using it to prompt things for my email responses. I love using it for this. And then they also might say, I'm really concerned about how it's going to impact jobs, how it's going to impact the community, how it's going to impact relevancy for college and things like that. One thing that we want people to be having the conversation about and thinking very seriously about is how this impacts kids. Because when it comes to technology, when it comes to big tech companies, they think of children last, if at all. So it's our jobs, we talk about this in the class, it is our jobs as parents and as educators to be the gatekeepers of our children's time and attention, and not assume that all the other places are going to be doing that. So I'm so excited to introduce Emily to you guys. If you were in my local social rejects class back in the fall, where we met right here in my living room and in Valerie's living room, you met Erin Lochner of the Opt-Out family. And after she Zoomed with us, she said, you need to get in touch with Emily Harrison. You would love her. You would love everything she writes. So I was like, okay. And so I followed her on Substack. Emily writes the Dear Christian Parent Substack, and I love the tagline to her Substack. It is, the internet is not a playground for children. And Emily, I want to honor you because you guys, she is bold. She is not out to win subscribers. She is not out to not offend. She is charitable in all of her critiques, but she is convicting, and she will just ignite a desire for you to give the best for your kids as all of these things change. And so thank you so much for being here. And Emily, these are the Social Rejects
Yeah.
Club people, and I want to honor you guys for being, I'm seeing like Katie's in Kansas and Allie's in Oregon and Kelsey's are you in Kansas or Nebraska, Kelsey? Jennifer's in North Carolina. We have people all over, and then also here in
Kansas.
Texas. Kansas. Okay, thank you. So, so that's what we're trying to do, is we're trying to make these little pockets of people who are rejecting the norms when it comes to social media for kids and all of technology. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you. Thanks, Emily.
Great. Thank you so much, Gina. I don't think I knew that Erin was who had told you about me. She is so sweet and so encouraging, and such a help. And I love her book. If you haven't picked it up, The Opt-Out Family, it's fantastic. So, a little bit more about me. I kind of got well, I told Gina our power went out at my house last night, so my home office is kaput, and I am sharing the office with a bunch of men who do construction work, and are working at the office today. So if you hear a little bit in the background, that's them, not me. But thankful to some friends who kind of let me hop in on their office and use their Wi-Fi today. So a little bit more about me though. I kind of originally got into this screens and space kind of kids reduction on screen time space around 2017. Really what had happened personally was, as a parent, my oldest son is about to be 14. I've got a son who will be in middle school next year. So we are kind of right in the thick of it in those kind of high school, middle school, teenage years. And back in 2017, we were just seeing a lot of issues around screen time in our home. When it was time to turn the TV off, or the educational, in air quotes, educational games on the iPad. We were just seeing a lot of negative behaviors that we didn't like. And I remember really clearly standing in my living room one day and thinking, if I don't get a handle on this now as a parent, it's not going to get any better. We weren't really training our kids' affections. There was a lot of behavior manipulation, right? Like, well, you misbehave, we'll take away your afternoon show. You do a good job, you can get a little bit more screen time, and sticker charts and popsicle sticks, all the kind of things. So we were just kind of manipulating outcomes. We weren't actually getting at the root of the matter, and kind of affecting change in our kids' hearts. So that's what kind of launched me into all of that. And I started taking kind of my other professional background and kind of morphed it over to this side, and have been here since 2017. So it's been great. As Gina said, I do write a Substack called Dear Christian Parent. There I speak specifically to Christian parents, pastors, and youth leaders. I am a Christian, so that kind of informs a lot of what I'm saying in that space, because I think there's some things that as a Christian church we can benefit from learning, but I'm also involved with 3 other organizations that are not religious based at all. One is Screen Strong. It's a group I kind of go to. They've got a lot of information on kind of brain science and what's happening. And, we all know now it takes 25 years for a kid's brain to mature, but what does that process look like kind of as kids are growing up and developing? And my almost 14-year-old told me the other day that he's mature, and maybe he's already as mature as he's going to be. And I just, people are different. And I'm like, okay, bud, well, we can, let's talk a lot of brain science and we can kind of get into that. And, but I do remember as a 14-year-old, I would have said the same thing, right? Most of us would, parents are kind of doofuses and kids know it all. And that's just part of the process. So we don't want to beat up on our kids about those things, but we do need to kind of factor those things in when we're thinking about screens and social media and all that stuff. Another organization that I do a lot of stuff with is the Phone Free Schools movement. That launched, let's see, probably in the past 6 months or so. It's kind of really taken off since Jonathan Haidt's book came out. He's on their advisory board as well. And we've got a lot of initiatives across the country. One here in Virginia, where I am, has been fantastic, that our governor has really championed. And that is an executive order that removes removes phone use by students during the school day, which seems kind of simple, right? Like, if you all start pulling out your smartphone right now and start texting your mom or your best friend or anything, we're gonna lose a lot of what's kind of happening together in a group. So obviously the same is true for kids. And we ought to be addressing that as adults, and that's okay to say, no, this isn't for right now. The third group that I do a lot of work with is also Fair Play. They have a Screen Time Action Network, specifically their Screens in Schools work group, and kind of a big network of people. That's where Phone Free Schools movement kind of launched out of that group. So there's a lot of great networks. So that's how I try to kind of stay informed and keep up with what's going on. But specific today, Gina asked me to talk about AI, which is something I've kind of been pushing more into. It's really something a year or two ago I didn't know very much about, and I knew that this was coming, and I couldn't kind of continue to sit in this space and not be informed on it. And that's true both just in my advocacy work, but also as a mom and needing to be able to kind of see what's out there. So I wanted to kind of first, I find it really helpful when we say AI, a lot of us think like C-3PO from the Star Wars movies, or we think, of an Alexa, maybe, play my favorite song, and a kind of something talking back to us. But just to kind of give an overview of some terminology, I find is a helpful place to start. So jumping into that, there's really kind of two main categories of AI. The first is narrow AI. So narrow AI is really AI that can do a narrow task. It can do one specific thing or just a small number of things, but it can't really change or morph from that, right? So your weather app can tell you what the weather is going to be today. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, right? Netflix can say you've liked home design shows. Here's another home design show you might like, right? But Netflix isn't going to tell you what you should wear tomorrow because there's going to be a rainstorm, and your weather app isn't going to recommend, what book you might read based upon the shows you like to watch. They can't do those things. They are trained on algorithms. Algorithm really is just a really fancy like math term, and it is a really, really complex math problem. So it is a lot of, we think in words, computers think in math and numbers. The other thing to know about narrow AI is that it's not capable of making moral or ethical judgment calls. So I think we kind of know about this with self-driving cars, and well, what if, you know, a dog runs across the street and a child? What will a car know how to do? And humans can kind of make these types of situation awareness and make a decision, right? But a car can't have that ability to kind of make that kind of decision. So computer scientists are constantly working to try to improve these types of learning, machine learning that AI systems do. But within AI, within kind of this narrow AI, we also have something called generative AI or Gen AI. And this, it's a subset of AI that generates language. So this is your Chat GPT, your Google Gemini, OpenAI, DeepSeek, which is China's platform, just came out, was it last week, week before last, which is a big deal because they are able to do what we've been doing in the US, but much cheaper. And it seems to be pretty comparable. I haven't played around with DeepSeek at all, but I've played around with all these other ones. So those are all large language models, which is generative AI. You'll see this also called LLMs. With that, there's also this terminology you may have heard called the hallucination rate. Hallucination rate is when things just get completely made up that just aren't true. And this happens within LLMs because of something called word vectors. So really word vectors, all words have math codes associated with them. So think about like the biggest Venn diagram you've ever seen. And the more, I say hello, you say goodbye. So these are going to kind of be overlapping on the Venn diagram, right? We know that these words have some similar meanings or some similar usages within language. You say dog, cat, puppy, kitten, dog, kitten. You can start to kind of get all these overlapping Venn diagrams. And when you get into all this, that's really what LLMs are doing, is they're taking these word vectors and trying to create language, but it is all a really big math game. So sometimes these AI programs will hallucinate and just say things that are just completely not true or don't make any sense. So that's kind of all the narrow AI. That really is, there's a lot more to it, obviously, but that's really kind of the world of AI that we're living in right now. Social media sits in this. We know social media is big with algorithms and kind of the information that they're tracking from that. The other type of AI is AGI, or artificial general intelligence. That is not something that exists. It is still theoretical. That is kind of your C3PO. That is a robot who can think and act and talk like a human. That is where AI scientists are trying to get to, but it does not exist. And that really gets more into theology and sociology and psychology and everything as far as whether or not that's something that's actually going to be able to be created by humans. So we'll see on that. But it is what's coming next, and it's what we kind of need to know about as we're thinking about how we're training our kids to interact with what we have now, because we really don't know what's coming. So what do kids need when it comes to all of this? Kids really need good decision-making skills. So kind of going back to this narrow AI and thinking about Netflix, one thing is, if you're sitting there watching a Netflix show, it's going to recommend you watch the next episode and the next episode, and it's going to start playing it before you're even done with the one you're watching because it wants you to stay on because that's its job. So we're not going to be mad at Netflix for being a business that wants to make money and keep people watching and sell advertisements. That's what it is created to do. What Netflix can't do is say, hey, Johnny, you've been sitting on the sofa for 2 hours vegging out, and your dog needs a walk, and it's a really nice day out, and you need to get some exercise. So Netflix isn't going to tell your kid, get up and go do what is good for you. We know we're seeing skyrocketing rates of anxiety and depression among kids. And the two biggest things you can do to kind of decrease that. There was actually a study that came out not that long ago about internet addiction of college students in China, and it was pointing out that college students in China who are addicted to the internet, the two biggest things that they can do, and this just holds with what we've known for a long time, exercise and be outside. So this is what we want our kids doing so that they are growing up in a healthy kind of manner, mentally, physically, all the things. So, excuse me, that's where we want to be headed, and we have to think about kids differently than we think about adults. Kind of the long-standing side of this was if we don't give kids computers, then they're not going to be prepared for the workforce. We've kind of all heard that. And that initially was really true when we were looking at the late 90s, when computers were big old clunky desktops. You put it there and it's staying there and it's not moving because it's so heavy and it's got this tower next to it. And remember the floppy drive disk, they were like this big and there was nothing floppy about them. Those were the other ones that had a different name. And, computers used to have a lot of hardware and a lot of expense to it. And they were pretty much used by wealthy college educated families who were able to have that at home. And so those kids would go to college, maybe they would take a personal computer with them. They're typing papers and using word processors instead of using a typewriter. And there started to be a real shift. So there was this belief that if we give all the kids computer access, that we're going to even the playing field. Instead, what we've seen, that started about 2012. Instead, what we've seen is that there has just been year after year after year of learning loss within the classroom. The nation's report card just came out earlier this week, and all my days are running together, can you tell? And again, I think all states except for Louisiana showed declines in reading and math skills among students. We link a lot of this to COVID, but all of this was happening pre-COVID too. And it really all goes back to around 2012 when we started giving kids kind of one-to-one devices, which is kind of one tablet or laptop to one student. I was seeing this as a parent with my own kids when they were in early elementary school in their public school, and kind of started pushing back on a lot of it and really was finding that this was not teachers looking at different methods of teaching and saying, oh, this is better than what I've been able to provide before. This was really kind of top-down driven, and that's what we're seeing across the country. And it is really hard to look a gift horse in the mouth. So if Google comes and says, hey, we're going to give you access to our full suite of platforms, and we're going to give you all, tablets, and here you go. What struggling public school wouldn't say, yes, thank you. Like, free things are nice, right? They're helpful. In this case, they've turned out not to be helpful. There's a study, actually it goes back to 2017 from Google. It's called Project Aristotle, which if you know anything about the philosopher Aristotle, I love that name, but really what it found was that soft skills are what help Google employees, so tech employees, STEM-driven employees. Soft skills was what made them the most valuable employees. So they kind of looked at this from their human resources department as far as hirings, firings, complaints, conflicts among employees, and what makes for a good employee. It was things like good communication, curiosity, emotional intelligence, the confidence to make mistakes. And that's a big one that's always kind of stuck with me is good employees are confident enough to take risk and maybe make a mistake and you fail and you learn something and okay, now we're going to do it differently. And that's really what we need to be thinking about as far as raising kids is how do we train them to fail well, and to fail in a way that it's not harmful to them, but helps build their confidence. Like, okay, that method on that math problem didn't work, but here's how we're going to do it again. I've got a colleague in New Hampshire. She's a speech pathologist, Denise, and she was telling me this story a few months ago about a fifth grade student that she was sitting and helping in the classroom. And he's on this math program and it's got rocket ships and, shooting stars and all the things. And if he gets the problem right, he's going to get this little explosion in the universe. And he's sitting there working through this problem and really struggling with it. And he gets the wrong answer. But she, as somebody who understands fifth grade level math, is sitting next to him and sees that he didn't do the problem incorrectly. He just made a little error, right? Like 2 + 1 is 4. If he had corrected that tiny little mistake, he would have actually gotten the problem correctly because his method was correct, but his math just needed some tweaking. So she tries to get pencil and paper and, hey, let's work through that one again. Let's go over it. And he wouldn't do it. He kind of resigned himself and said to her, the computer said I was wrong, so I'm wrong. And that's so indicative of where we are right now with kids is that they trust what they're told. And if a computer is telling them that they're wrong, then they're wrong. And so now the computers become the authority, not the teacher, not the parent, because this computer is something that they're using all the time. So go back to thinking about AI, right? On these hallucination rates. Well, what happens when the information they're getting is just bad? Do you remember when Google Gemini first came out, there were all these pictures being released, and there was one that was like George Washington, he was black. Yeah, Gina, you remember this? And so coded into how Google Gemini had set up their program when they're creating these AI generated images, they created the first president of the United States black. Now we all know that not only is that not true, but given the history of our country, the good, the bad, and the ugly, that wasn't even possible to have had a black president at that point in time in our history, right? But a child doesn't know that George Washington wasn't black when they've never been told who George Washington is, and they're just now starting to learn these things. So as we're kind of going through all of this, again, it's just thinking about how kids are educated, and that it's not just in the classroom, but it's also at home. So what we've seen a lot in the classroom is ed tech and this kind of these personalized learning platforms that when you start getting into them, it's really hard to understand always what kids are seeing and learning because everything is specific to that child. So if I get on one platform and do some math, I may have a completely different setup than the classmate who's sitting next to me. This is true on ed tech platforms. This is true on social media. This is true on our Netflix accounts, right? This is, I don't know how, but it's also true on our weather apps. My husband and I, we just had a snowstorm here in Virginia where we live, and we were both looking at our same phone brand, same phone app, and I saw that we were going to get 3 to 4 inches, and he said we were going to get 7 to 8. And we're like holding them next to each other. We're like, they're not even the same. How is this true? We live in the same home. We definitely are in the same zip code, and then we're going to get the same storm, all the things. So it's hard to even know what somebody's always seeing when things are kind of always shifting and changing. Really what we want is kids who understand what AI is, that it's not something that can make capable moral or ethical decisions. It's not something that is using intelligence and thinking and processing information. It is grabbing wide swaths of data that's out there and trying to regurgitate it into something that makes sense. And those are really, really cool programs that exist, but we can't look to them as authority figures. And a lot of kids are, we're now seeing kids who are beginning friendships with AI personalities, chatbots. I hesitate to call them friendships because they're not, but there, you may have seen a case. There was a mom who's actually suing this, which is why this case hit the news. But her son, I believe he was 15 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old, close to the age of my son, had a girlfriend who was an AI chatbot, and he became completely enamored with her and started telling her he wanted to be with her. Anyway, through all of this, he meant he wanted to die and be with her, and ended up taking his own life because he was so caught in this, and this relationship felt so real to him that he believed if he died, he would somehow be with this AI chatbot. Um, that's like the extreme worst side of this, of the side, of the world, right? But it is happening, and it's happening more than we realize. And I think we all want to go, well, my child would never, and I would never let my child, and this would never happen. But this is still the world that our kids are living in. Even if we're putting all the filters and restrictions and all of that. And it is a world that is not created for kids to be able to step out of and understand what's really happening. They need to be outside. They need to be making mistakes. They need to be failing and learning. And they need to be able to do that in the safety of the physical world, not in the online world where anything they say or do will be there forever, right? Um, Kids do dumb stuff, right? We've all been kids, and we've all thought of stuff that we've done as teenagers, and I don't think any of us wish that all of that would end up on the internet for all the world to see. But yet we're expecting our kids to somehow be able to manage that if we just talk to them enough. So the big thing we kind of are seeing now is a lot of digital literacy programs where we're trying to tell kids that not everything you see, read, or hear on the internet is true. And so you've got to be the one to figure out if it's true or false. And this is just putting more on kids than they are developmentally capable of doing. If kind of pay attention this next week with your kids and some of the stuff they say. Well, Johnny told me that the basketball team won the game by like 100 points, and your 8-year old is going to believe that that's true. And you're going, that's not actually possible. There's no way. We know that the team didn't win by 100 points, but because Johnny told your 8-year old believes it as gospel truth, right? Kids fall for silly stuff all the time. And a lot of times that stuff's well-intentioned, but kids don't understand reality and and myth as well as sometimes we think that they might. So to ask them to then get on the internet and go, well, the math program told me I was wrong. And the social media site said that, boys my age ought to like X, Y, and Z and ought to pursue X, Y, and Z. And that must be normal. Or girls my age dress like this, or look like this, or act like this. That must be what's normal. That's the world that our kids are really caught in right now. And all of that is AI driven. So anything on social media with algorithms, you pause for a nanosecond to look at an image that catches your eye and it goes, okay, more of that. Um, Kids can't make even a mistake for a nanosecond and not have it affect their online life. My recommendation for all of this is we've got to teach kids what it means to be human. And if kids don't understand what it means to be human and what it means to be machine, we can't expect that they're going to, one, go into the workplace and have the skills that Google STEM department says that they need, right? That they have these soft skills, like communication, curiosity, the ability to make mistakes. They need to be creative, have critical thinking skills. They need to be trustworthy and have trustworthy sources to draw upon. There was a quote from Steve Jobs that I read recently from 1982. So way back in there. And he was saying something along the lines of, if I do what everybody else does, then nothing I do will be special because so I've got to kind of make my own mark. I've got to find my own niche, find my own talent. And we tell kids that, like, find things that you enjoy, whether it's piano or soccer or horseback riding or, poetry, whatever that is, find something that makes you different. But yet we're pushing all of our kids into this online funnel where they're all seeing similar stuff and being taught similar ways. And we're not giving them opportunity to kind of explore different avenues. And so as employees, they're not going to be the best employees that they could be if they haven't had time to kind of jump through all these different avenues. Um, I'm looking at the clock and seeing we want to have time for Q&A, Gina, and I could go on and on. So I guess the last thing I'd add on that with AI is we need to also be asking in schools that our kids are being taught computer skills, like typing, word processing, how to use, what's a computer, what's a hard drive. I was talking to a middle schooler the other day who submits almost all of his assignments on Google, but had never heard the term hard drive. What would it be if you you're 16 years old and you go get a driver's license and you don't know a car has an engine, right? Or you want to learn how to drive, ride a bike, but you don't even know that a bike has pedals. Like, you have to learn the parts of something before you can understand what it is. So that's I'll say that we need to, I'm not anti kids being on computer, but I am very pro kids being taught how to use the hardware that goes along with it. So do you want to open it up to a little
That's
Q&A?
great. Yes,
Yeah.
everybody. Yeah, if your video is, yeah, let's give her a visual clap here. So helpful and so right in line with everything the social. I think Katie and Kelsey would agree. Like, this is right up Social Rejects Club alley. This is like what we do in our class, and it just supplements everything that we already have studied and are working toward so well. And it kind of gets us thinking deeper about AI specifically. So thank you so much. If you do have a question for Emily, raise your little virtual hand and we'll start a queue. It might be under the reaction button. I do have the chat turned off because as I've been on my own journey to figure out like healthy interaction online, I've just decided chat's not good for Zoom. I don't like it.
Yep, it's very distracting. It can be.
It's been awesome though to be on Zooms and people to be like, I'm so sorry to interrupt you, but I'm looking for the chat so I can say something. I'm like, say it. Here you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I have a couple of I want to piggyback on some things you said.
Sure.
Um, all the things about the computer skills that you just described,
Yeah.
like knowing what a hard drive is and what the cloud is. It's so true. Like looking at people like Elon Musk, he was a huge reader and
Right.
he took computers apart.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't play games on, I think he did play some video games, but he was not, spending hours and hours as a user. He was
Yeah.
that curiosity factor, right? And it's like for our kids to know like a website won't exist without a server and all of those things.
Right. Right.
It helps to kind of reiterate the fact that this is man-made,
Yeah. There's a physical element to all of this that we neglect because we don't see the physical side of what all it takes. Yeah.
So good. When you were talking about the hallucination rate, which
Yeah.
I hadn't even heard that term more than a couple of times, probably in what I read from you, but I wanted to share a little bit from a screenshot that I took when my Apple software was updating recently. And it says, I kid you not, like way down on the terms, it
Mm-hmm.
says, note, Apple Intelligence is currently in beta. Apple Intelligence uses generative models and outputs may be inaccurate,
Yeah.
unexpected, or offensive.
Yeah.
I just read that to my husband. I was like, how many people you think are going to read that? None,
No.
And so it's just like it's what our kids are also, any kid with a smartphone is also being prompted to add the same software to their smartphone without reading those terms, right? Or understanding them exactly
Yeah.
like what
Right.
you said.
Mm-hmm.
I love that you said so the counseling for our kids and the mental health issue, like all my friends with teenage girls in their home who don't have social media say, when people hear that they are not on anxiety medication, they're shocked
Yeah,
because all their friends are, and people are not cutting it off at the root. And and when you said they need to exercise and be outside, it just makes me think about the garden and how God put Adam and Eve in the garden to work, and work was
right,
good.
right. Work
And
was pre-fall. Yeah.
right, to work, and work
Yeah.
is good, and to be in his creation, right? And so it's like even non-Christians can agree that going for a walk separate from your iPhone is so good
Yeah.
and healthy.
Mhm.
I
Great.
love that. Um, okay. Oh, I love that you said kids, all these conversations, like well-meaning, like you said, organizations. Can you speak a little bit deeper about that? Like we are bombarded even within this space right here. How do we
Mhm.
do this well? We're bombarded with well-meaning tips and advice of
Yeah,
like, have them sign this contract. Make sure you
sure.
just to them
So
consistently.
yeah, so there's a case pending before the Supreme Court right now about age gating, which we don't have time to get into, but it's a court actually that originated in Texas where you are, so maybe you've heard a bit about it. But Justice Samuel Alito, I can't remember his exact quote. I've got it in one of my articles, that the one that came out today. And he was like, "We've been playing around with filters and parental controls. They don't work." So the Supreme Court has said, not in a ruling, but just in oral arguments, these things don't work. And we keep talking about them as though they're going to. And the solution is teaching kids what it means to be human, letting them be outside, letting them play, letting them fail, letting them do hard things. And then once they've done that, once they've matured through that process, which takes almost 25 years, then they can start to be ready for a lot more of this stuff that's coming at them. But they are just not capable of handling smartphones, social media, AI. They're not ready, and they're not going to be ready, despite what my almost 14-year-old son wants to believe about his super maturity. Um, so we have to kind of go back and go, okay, what does work? Landlines are safe. I've never heard of anybody seeing porn from a landline. I guess if somebody stuck a picture
800
on it somehow,
number.
you could.
Yep.
Landlines work. Talk text phones only, where you can't send, receive pictures, or access the internet. There's one that I really like called the Wise Phone. If you get their basic plan, that is a great first phone for a kid. And as they get older and they're in college, and you want them to have Uber or access to their bank account, you can kind of scale these things up. The pinwheel phone is another one. I've got some friends who like that. That works really well. But we're just asking our kids to take on more than what they can, because again, this is like Netflix. I'm not going to be mad at Netflix for wanting me to stay on my sofa for 3 hours. That's its job. Social media's job is to get you to stay on. Apple's job is to get you to stay on their phone and keep using apps and all the money and stuff that they make from it. Then we just can't ask our kids to be able to constantly push up against that.
Yes, and amen. That makes me think back to when I taught middle school from 2010 to 2014,
Okay.
which 2012
Oh,
was right in the middle of that.
yeah, you saw the shift.
Right. And a lot of you guys who have been in the class know that my school got, one-to-one, iPad for every kid in 2012. And then things start appearing on the wall, this think acronym, right? Here's how to be a good digital citizen now that we've told you all to bring phones to school. Is it true? Is it helpful? Is it, I think back and I look
Yeah.
at and I remember being so caught up in this lie that we've got to train them now how to
Right.
interact online. Like this is so good. But what I wish I could do is go back and be like, you need to do that in the real world first.
Right.
There's no way that you can do that well online without, and we talk about this in the class, it's the real world and the online world are different places that you
Yeah.
are, and they're different aspects to each one. Kelsey has a question. Go ahead, Kelsey.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I am. Okay. I'm normally not on my phone, so this is weird. But is there a way, because I have to get off soon and I didn't have a chance to write it down, your recommendations for like those phones and stuff? I know, because I felt like we tried to look into a landline and like they kind of like don't exist anymore. It was like
Yeah.
more money to get
So
it.
I have a whole article on my Substack. It's called Landlines.
Are
Um,
cool again or
Landlines
something.
are cool or something. I don't know. Like when being retro is still cool. But I do link to a couple of different companies. There's one, we just have ours through our internet provider. So right now our power is actually out at our house. So it wouldn't work. And that's just a risk we decided to kind of take. I know for some people they don't have like the little plug where you just stick a plug in your house based upon what year your house was built. So that works for us. There's another company, friends of mine really like called Uma, OOMA. Do you have that one? It's $100 for the device, and then there's no monthly service fee. So you're $100 all in. My kids we have a landline and we love it. My kids, one know how to make phone calls because we had to work through that. How do you hold a phone? How do you wait for somebody to talk? And then you have a turn and then they have a turn. And so these are a lot of these soft skills that, Google's Project Aristotle is talking about. And as we've gotten landlines, more of our friends' families have gotten landlines, but my kids will also pick up a phone and call a friend's mom's cell phone. You know, hi, Mrs. Smith, can I talk to Johnny? So that's really how they communicate and make plans. And yesterday they went sledding, at a friend's house who's got a big hill in the backyard, and they kind of set all that up on their own. And I think it's appropriate. Kids need to know how to make plans, right? And we've lost some of that. But if you check that article, I kind of give a lot more reasons, and I do link to a few different choices. So hopefully one of those will work.
Okay, that's awesome. My son's almost 10 and he wants to stay home more. And I
Oh,
want that for him.
yes.
But I'm like, there's no way to get a hold of us if an
Right.
emergency happens.
That was a big reason why we got it, is that my kids were starting to stay home alone. And, I can call and say, I thought I was going to be home in 30 minutes, but it's going to, there's a long line at the grocery store and it's going to be a little longer, or, whatever. Yeah, it's great.
Uh,
We love it.
And I've written down everything that she's been sharing, and I'll send out kind of like a summary with links like to the Wise Phone and other things like that as well. Okay, Emily, you shared Uma in that Substack, right? That's where I
Yeah,
heard.
it is. Yep. Some of my friends have that one. Yep.
We have it. We had to plug it directly into our router, so
Okay.
it can't be downstairs. So it's upstairs, but I left Jordan and Adam at home yesterday, and I was like, phone's upstairs if you need to call me. It's better
Right.
that it's upstairs because they have gotten really into prank calling from it.
Mhm.
And so when
Sure.
it's in the living room, I'll constantly catch them like prank calling, their cousins or my
Right.
mom
Yeah.
or whatever. And I'm like,
We
stop
like
doing that.
My kids like to call my husband when he's at work a lot and say, "This is, the local pizza shop. What's your order?" And I'm like, "Do you think we're gonna have pizza tonight if you just keep pretending that?" But apparently they do. So, yeah.
Awesome. Okay, last call for questions, comments for Emily. Allie, go for it.
So Emily, are you saying you're advising is no AI for kids and teens?
No personal. I mean, I honestly, right now, you can't really get away from AI, right? Like it's everywhere. But I strongly, strongly on the education. Are you asking kind of educational or social or both?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Socially, I would say yes, absolutely no. I think kids need to learn to trust parents, grandparents, teachers, pastors. We need to kind of determine who's a trustworthy source of information and who's not. Little Johnny, who says the basketball team won by 100 points, maybe little Johnny was mistaken, or maybe little Johnny is always making stuff up and isn't a trustworthy source. So once kids have kind of determined who is and isn't trustworthy, and that can take through the teen years. Once they've established that, then they could be ready for kind of a social use of AI. Help me. I've got these 5 ingredients in the refrigerator. What should I make for dinner? Things like that. are kind of okay uses of AI. I don't think any AI is going anywhere. I don't think we need to be super afraid of it as adults if we understand what it is and what it's capable of. Educationally, we're seeing just rampant cheating in high schools and colleges, even Christian colleges, based on AI and large language models, and just people writing papers. And the only way I think we can really get a to a spot where we're not having that, because now teachers are using AI to detect if students have used AI to cheat, and round and round and round we go on the merry-go-round, is to actually go back to teaching handwriting and cursive and to be submitting papers in writing.
Mm.
I don't think otherwise we'll get a handle on it, but I think the kids who are growing up in schools where that's the environment, whether it's private school, public school, homeschool, whatever it is, I think when they're growing up in those environments, they're going to be the ones who are best prepared in the workforce. They're going to be the leaders of this next generation. They're going to be the ones determining what AI is and isn't doing. And everybody who just knows how to kind of put in, receive, just isn't going to be prepared for the workforce. So,
Yeah. The way I see it is, if you're someone who is using AI for writing anything, you have to be a good writer to interact with that tool first.
yes, yes,
Because you have to be able to skim through, not even skim, you have to look line by line and check that thing and make
mm-hmm.
thrown in something totally random.
Yeah,
I'll be honest, it saves me so much time. I have so much writing and typing I do in my computer.
yeah.
It helps me not have as much screen time, right, in my job. So
Yeah.
I use it, but because I had, K-12 education, becoming a
Right.
good writer, I can use it because I'm smarter than it and
Yeah.
edit it. But what freaks me out is kids, that's the only type of writing they have no concept of how to read it and write and edit it.
Right. They don't know what they don't know yet. So I've got a good friend and she's crazy smart and has one of those jobs where, I don't know, she's like, there's one of 300 people in the country who can do what she does. Like, I don't even understand it. And she says she uses AI all the time, but she's so highly skilled in her field that she recognizes when AI is trustworthy, when it's hallucinating, when it's just giving bad information. And she can quickly process through stuff in her work with that resource. But a kid just they don't know yet. They don't know. And we can't expect them to.
Yeah, that's how it works for me as well.
Yeah.
The other aspect of writing that it feels like we're going to lose, oh, hi, Brant Child, is when you read Tolkien and then you read Lewis, they're both amazing, but you know when you're reading Lewis and you know when you're
Right.
reading Tolkien. And if we're all
Mhm.
using AI to write, you don't have you. It's not you anymore, And so like that is the human element. That's what it means to be a human, is to have your own writing style and your own voice. And so that's one thing that kids are going to give away and not place any value on when they're reading either.
Yeah, there's the School of the Unconformed is another great Substack. She's written a lot. Her name's Ruth. Her husband's Peiko. They write a lot on AI and writing, and kind of what society is going to lose as far as deep thinkers and kind of the next generation of leaders. So she's another good spot to check out.
Thanks for that. Okay, the last thing that I want to share before we leave is when it comes to AI companions, when you're speaking talking about the boy in Florida, is that number one, these things are advertised to our kids on social media, on gaming apps, especially our boys, in the form of artificial skimpily clad ladies.
Yeah.
They're doing it at friends' houses unless we communicate with those friends' parents about what we need to align on. And it is incredibly mainstream for people to believe that this is actually a good thing for society. It'll solve our loneliness epidemic, and so being able to accept that we have to be teaching our kids that what it means to be human is to have relationships with humans. And so,
Yeah.
yeah.
There's with that, I'll just add Chris Rowan. She's a pediatric psychiatrist. I might have her title wrong. Anyway, she's in Canada, and she has said kids need to be appropriately touched. I think it's 12 times a day. So a little pat on the back, you know, a tap on the shoulder. It doesn't have to, you know, a hug from mom before you run off to school. And that is part of what builds stable, healthy, mature kids who become stable, healthy, mature adults is just that physical touch. And it's so important. And if any of us walked into a room and there was a baby crying and nobody around, we'd all go pick up the baby because we know that something about that physical touch is just going to help soothe that child. And that's just true of humans. And so the idea that an AI companion can fill that void, it just doesn't jive with what humans are and what we'll continue to be. So
Yes. Okay, well, thank you so much, Emily.
so much for having me. I hope this was helpful to everybody.
So helpful. Thank you. Thank you. All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody. Artificial is your 20% off code if you're not in the spring class yet. All right. See you guys later.
Bye. Thanks.